It would seem as though.
Hi, it's me.
Good morning. I suppose by the time y'all listen to this, it's probably afternoon. If you listen to it right when it comes out. And now I'm just rambling.
Mm-hmm.
So welcome to another episode of It Would Seem As Though. The podcast where we talk about anything, everything, and nothing.
Mostly nothing.
Also, the only queer mother-daughter podcast that's recorded in my dining room. So
Hey!
there.
Hey! We're the first.
Well, you know, I'm Vesta.
I'm Annika.
And we're glad you're here for another week of our shit-talking and shenanigans.
Yeah.
Because God knows what we're going to talk about. Listen, I want to start with this this thing I heard the other day that I thought was so brilliant. It's a Mexican proverb.
Okay.
Proverb's maybe not the right word, but it is, they thought they could bury us. They didn't know we were seeds.
Oh, I love that.
I love that.
Yeah.
I heard that. I was watching We're Here.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I think I'm most of the way caught up.
Okay.
If y'all have HBO, you have to watch We're Here.
Oh, it's so good.
It is so good. And there are episodes, however, and I know we talked about this last week, there are episodes that just trigger the shit out of me because I'm like afraid these girls are going to get killed, or the folks left behind when they're all done are going to get killed.
Yeah.
Because the people in these towns are awful. You know, like
Hugely awful.
threatening folks, and you know, it's like talking about drag queens being groomers, and it's like, I know we also talked about that. It's just, but it makes me sick. It's like, ain't nobody grooming nobody.
No.
Calm down.
I know, well, and with the world and what's happening currently, I mean, and maybe not even just the world, but here, you know, like, there's been talk about, like, the new Jim Crow laws that are being passed. Have you heard anything about that? And, you know, making it, like, illegal for children to go see drag shows. Like, it's very weird. It's a very weird, scary, like, post-apocalyptic time. You know what I mean? It feels like very conservative versus non-conservative, which is like, I feel like the majority of Americans are non-conservative, but
I don't know anymore. I'm starting to feel like conservative is the majority.
It's all about like hyperbole though, and like bolstering people and getting them afraid of the boogeyman, which is black people and queers. Like, you know?
Right,
like,
well, because it is all fear-based.
Yes.
And it's all of that fear is based in nothing. Because all the things they're telling you should be afraid of are not things that are even real things.
Yeah.
You know? Because, you know, again, 99% of queer people, not groomers.
No.
Yes, there are those probably ones who are.
Of course.
Because they're in every group. But the bulk of folks, the majority of folks who are straight men.
Yeah, and like, so like Dahmer, the show that was on, he was obviously a queer sexual predator and serial killer, right? Like
Right, but how common is that?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is like, but then look at every other serial killer who was
straight white man.
Most of the time cishet, yeah, so I don't know. It's just like another fear-based thing to like make people scared of something. It's so stupid. Like, drag has been around forever. Queer people have been around forever.
Right. I've seen a lot of memes going around. It's like, you've been entertained by drag your entire life. And it's pictures of like Milton Berle and Bugs Bunny and, you know, Tom Hanks and different people. It's like, who did drag for TV or movies or nightclub acts or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that was all fine.
Yeah.
But you put people in drag and they're pretty. Okay, that's a problem.
Now the men folk can't tell the difference.
And I think that, you know, if we get right down to it, I think that's really it. Because if no one's attracted to these people, then no one cares. But as soon as your husband is attracted, or they find themselves attracted to some beautiful woman who happens to be a drag queen, it's like, that's problematic because it's questioning their sexuality and their manhood and their
And that's it, right?
whatever.
Their manhood is in question. And so that class I just finished about masculinity, that I think over anything else in the world, the most fragile thing in this world is masculinity.
Yeah.
Because if there's any sort of perceived threat, or like as a man someone thinks you have less masculinity, you overcompensate by beating your wife, or mass shootings, or buying a Lamborghini, you know, like by doing things to prove you're a man. And this is like social science kind of studies, you know? And so it is interesting to think about. I going through this class, I told you I was eye rolling a lot. Like I got a lot of good information, but I was also like, boo-hoo. You know what I mean? Like, yes, I get men have their struggles, but this whole system and all the power structures that you built don't serve you anymore. Now we're gonna cry. Like, go fuck yourself. Like,
right.
I don't care, you know?
Well, it's like, it makes me think of the people who were like, well, you know, some black man got my job because of affirmative action. No, you didn't get your job because you were not the most qualified person.
Yeah.
That people cannot even fathom that some black man could be more qualified for your job than you are. Because you're not magical just because you're a white man.
Also, let's say this, quit calling it your job. It's not your job,
well,
obviously.
Apparently not, or they would have hired you for it.
So just because you think you're entitled to that job and someone else who's like marginalized got it, you never had entitlement to it. No. So that is a funny thing that we do where it's like, oh, my job, or they took my job. Like, no, you didn't have a job, bitch. That's why you're mad.
I mean, if it was your job and they booted you out of it,
sure,
then yes, they took your job.
But why'd they boot you out?
But apparently they booted you out of your job because you were shit at it.
Because you were racist.
Yeah.
Baby.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah. No big deal.
No big deal. This week we were going to talk about, March is Women's History Month. And we decided we should talk about some women who are interesting or notorious or not women you're probably going to read about in your little school magazines or even see on the news because they're either very ancient history or they're, you know, queer and or both.
Well, and I like it.
And or both.
And or both. And or both often, you know?
Yeah.
When we decided to do this, of course, I'm like, well, I'm going to look into ancient history. Like, I don't care about all you contemporary people. But I wanted...
So by ancient history, you mean like my childhood?
Yeah. So back when you were born, hanging out with, you know, Socrates. Yeah. I mean, just because there's a lot of things that happened in history that we still know about and affect today. But yeah, so...
But speaking of women, I want to, just for a minute before we go on, talk about you. Because the other day you sent me the message about your paper and how great it was.
Yeah.
Tell everybody what your professor said.
Okay, so I wrote this paper it's an upper division sociology class, Men and Masculinity, and we had to use theory and whatever and write about something that has to do with men tied through masculinity. And so I wrote about trans men and their relationship to masculinity and what that looks like. And it was like 15 pages. It had like a photo analysis section. It was like a big. And my professor, I missed one point because I used the wrong theory, but whatever. My professor told me that he thought it was such a good paper that he thinks that I should hold on to it, rework it just a little bit, and submit it for grad school. Thank you.
Well, what I find extra cool about that is when you told him that was going to be your topic, he was like, oh... That's going to be hard.
It's going to be really hard. There's not enough research there. And if it is, it's very sparse. And I said, okay.
So for those of you listening to this who've talked to me personally and said, God, Annika is so smart. Yeah. Yeah, she fucking is. She always has been.
Thank
you.
Yeah, so like, and I was like...
Was I surprised she got 99? I kind of was that it wasn't 100.
I know.
Because it's not like you to miss 1 point.
I know. Stupid.
I know. But so super proud.
Thank you.
You're amazing and so smart.
I was like, you know, you're nervous. I always think I'm going to do well, but then I'm always like, oh, maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm just going to fail it. You know, of course.
I know I had to hear that from my husband all the time he was in school. It's like, well, before he started school, I'm going to do terrible. I haven't been in school in years. I won't know, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I was all, you're going to kill it.
Yeah.
And then he gets in school and every assignment, I'm going to fail. And he, of course, got straight A's and was on the dean's list. And then, you know, National Honor Society and all that crap. It's like, you're doing horrible.
Loser. I know.
Terrible. Because he had one class out of his whole entire thing that he got a C. And he was just like,
melted into
about it. But the funny thing, of course, was that almost everyone else failed it.
Yeah.
And he got a C.
Yep.
So it was like, man, you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just hilarious the whole time he was in school. It's like,
yeah.
You got a degree and you graduated top of your class. I think you're okay.
What a fucking loser. No, I get it. I mean, and there are times not to be like, I'm so smart. I think that school's like one of my favorite things. I love learning. I love assignments. I love the educational process. But there are things that make me a little stressed out, especially with school. And like, you know, it was so ingrained in me as a child, like, for whatever reason, the only child in the entire family, that I had to do well academically.
Yeah.
And so that is, like, very long-lasting, because I'm 34 years old, and I'm still like, nope, can't get below an A. If I do, I'll...
34,
I know.
Jesus, you're old.
I'll die. But yeah, it was probably my degrees are in social science and humanities, and so I do a lot of reading and writing and not, like, analyzing, and so that was probably the nicest thing that any academic has said to me.
Right. Well, to tell you that you should submit that for,
going to grad school.
Grad school. That's amazing.
Yeah. Right. So
so kudos to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was very, very proud of you. Surprised? No.
Nor.
No, not at all. But very proud.
Thank you.
I've always been very proud of you, but. Yeah. And it's not just because you're super smart.
Yeah.
I mean, you're also a good person.
Okay.
You're evil, but...
I love that.
I mean, we hate other people, but you're good people.
Yeah. What did I say before this? Like, I didn't want to talk about most women. I only like fictional characters.
Right. Well, they are much easier to like.
Yeah, honestly.
Even the bad ones.
Yeah. Ugh. I just watched... This is kind of sidebar, but I just watched Maleficent 2.
I haven't... Wait. Did I see the second one?
It's when Aurora's all growed. She's all growed up and she's going to get married. Maybe you haven't.
I don't remember.
I want you to know that I was watching it and I took a...
Oh, wait, because she has her wings back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did see it.
I took a picture of Maleficent sitting at this dinner table and she's all, like, beautiful, horned, gothed out. And I was like, why? How does anyone identify with any other character other than Maleficent? Like, look at who... Will you want to be Aurora and not Maleficent? I would... No.
I don't think anybody wants to be Aurora.
I would rather be asleep for the rest
Little
of my
girls.
life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny. I was talking the other day, and I know we've talked about this before, that when I was in Disneyland the last time and ran into the Evil Queen, as I tend to every time I'm there, and she was looking at the tattoo of her on my arm, and she was like, my one question is, why does this say Wicked? And I was like, well, and she goes, excuse me, but everyone knows I'm the hero of that story.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Which made me think of the phrase that I love so much is no one's the villain of their own story.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And she's like, yeah, Snow White is the bad guy.
Yeah.
And it was like, you've just only heard her side of the story.
I love it.
And it's funny because I'm not sure exactly how that story could be spun.
Yeah.
Snow White's
to
the bad
make the
guy.
13-year-old the bad guy.
But at the same time, we always thought Maleficent was the bad guy until we saw the movie. And granted, that's just someone else's, but it's all fiction, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it was like, there are always two sides of a story. And so maybe Snow White was horrible.
Well, I think they don't...
Maybe she was a monster.
Well, have you met 13-year-olds?
I mean, she was a child. She was hitting puberty.
Honestly.
And teenager years all at the same time. Mm-hmm. Probably was a monster.
And you were her stepmother? Yeah, she was awful. You know she was awful.
You're not my real mother.
Exactly. No, and I love now that there's more stories being developed or have been, like Wicked, right? We get to see the Wicked... Cruella. We get to see the origin stories. And I... love that shit because it humanizes the villain. And we've talked about before is growing up, I've always seen myself in the villains because they were like, they were in the dark, or they wore darker garments, or they were queer coded. I always just saw myself more so in that opposed to the protagonist.
Well, and it's like when we read that thing about the Wizard of Oz, how the real bad guy in the story was Glinda, right? Because she tricked a little girl into murdering someone.
For shoes, girl.
For shoes.
They
were good shoes.
They were really good shoes.
Yeah. So, I mean, but it was really for power.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because she not only murdered the witch, but she dethroned the wizard. Mm-hmm. And Glinda then got the ultimate power.
Yeah.
So, did she mastermind the whole thing? Think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, really, she got this little girl to go do this thing that, it's like so she could get back home. And knowing... she could have gotten back home at
quick
any
in her
point.
fucking heels, bitch. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yep. Glinda.
So Glinda, I think Glinda was really the best.
This is why they say don't meet your heroes. You know what I mean? I know this is all fiction, but there's times even celebrities we see where like, oh, they're so great. But are they? Do we know that they're great? Yeah.
I know you now, of course, with everybody having a phone on their camera and Instagram and Twitter and all these things, you see instantly, like, some celebrity acts like a jackass in public, and it's like, boom, it's posted. It's like, oh.
Ew.
Oh, you're not nice.
I don't like it.
I know. What's funny is when all that stuff was going down, like the last couple of years, with all these men who was like, oh, and now they've done this, and they've done this. And I kept seeing these posts like, God, and I just saw this thing about Tom Hanks. And he really is a nice guy.
Yeah.
Like, and he did some other nice thing for it. It's like, yeah, there are some people out there who are just good people, but there's some people out there who
monsters.
Yeah, monsters.
Yep.
But anyway,
yeah.
So, and are we talking about any monsters on our show today, or are you talking about, like, I know you said you're talking about some ancient.
Yeah, I mean,
folks.
It depends on, again, your perspective of who's a monster. But I just chose women that are, yeah, I think maybe we can consider some of them monsters, but some of them are just, like, notorious.
Some are just misunderstood.
Yeah, they're just why were they doing the things they did in a male-dominated environment?
All right, well, do you want to start or should I start?
I'll start.
You start.
So the first one, and there's not a lot of information about this woman, but it is Sappho. Do you have your?
Of course, Sappho.
So Sappho was a Greek poet, and she was born in like the 7th century BC to a wealthy merchant family.
So she's a little bit older than me.
Just a little bit, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you were born around the time of Jesus, so I'm trying to...
Right, well, it was definitely after Jesus, so I'm a little younger than Sappho.
Oh, okay, phew. Anyway, she was a poet and a merchant, so that was why she was probably able to write so much poetry, because she could read and she could write. Merchant family, money. But throughout history, a lot of her work was destroyed because, well, she was a woman. So a lot of the things we have are just like fragments of her poetry, and I actually have one of the books. And I think it's interesting because I have a lot of poetry books and I love poetry, and you can read like an Edgar Allan Poe poem which takes up like 17 pages, and then you can read these little fragments of Sappho's poems, and sometimes it just feels like so deep with like the 3 lines that you could potentially read. She was also, it was assumed she was a lesbian because a lot of her poetry was directed towards other women and the Greeks had a lot of words for love, depending on what kind of love it was, but writing it in the term of, like, romantic love towards other women. And she was from the Isle of Lesbos, which is where, and so Sappho is where we get the term sapphic, and then lesbian is where we get, or Lesbos is where we get lesbian. So she is, like, the mother of lesbians, essentially, right? Like, those words didn't exist until people were all sapphic lesbian. Perfect. Look what we did. We're smart.
We're so clever.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
But a lot of, like Socrates, he considered her to be like his 7th muse, even though they weren't alive at the same time. But a lot of philosophers and poets thought she was like brilliant. But it was like, the ruling arc at the time was all nor, because she's a woman, and it happened a lot. And like,
what do women know?
And the passing of hands, within the Mediterranean too, like shit just got destroyed depending on who was ruling, So, but Sappho, when I was thinking of this, I was like, she is a very influential woman who, for 7th century BC, bitch, that was a long time ago. It was almost 3,000 years ago. That was quite some time,
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. So, and the fact that we still know her name or have any of her work is pretty fucking cool to me. But yeah, I thought she was important to talk about. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah.
Well, so my first person is not nearly that old.
Oh.
Her name is Frances Thompson. Mm-hmm. Frances Thompson was born into slavery and assigned male at birth.
Okay.
And at the age of 26, she was freed and living according to her proper gender. So she was living as a woman.
Okay.
And it says she kept her face clean shaven and she wore brightly colored dresses and took in washing for pay. And she and her roommate, black woman, were brutally robbed and gang raped by several men, including 2 police officers. Which is how she came to be, notorious or noteworthy anyway, because other than the fact that, think about this, in the time of slavery, this woman who was like, no, I'm a woman, chose to live as a woman, which first of all, in any age, is a very brave act.
Yes.
because it is very dangerous. It's dangerous today. So in the 1800s, imagine. So she and the other women who were assaulted testified at a committee hearing held by the Congress, and she said that she and her roommate did not consent, which, or to that point, to that time, really meant nothing because women had virtually no rights. But her testimony became famous throughout the South and led to 10 years of persecution for her, gender identity, harassment accusations, including claims that she ran a brothel. She did not. But because of the times and because just moments before this time, she had no rights and she was property. The fact that she stood up and said, no, I said no. I did not give anyone consent to touch me. They violated my body. It started that kind of ball rolling.
Interesting. Yeah.
She was imprisoned for cross-dressing. That was the only thing they could make stick. Because they couldn't prove that she had a brothel because, well, she didn't. But she was jailed for cross-dressing and died later that year. But she suffered a lot behind bars because, of course, they put her in a male prison.
Yeah, of course.
And when people would ask her about her gender, she would always respond by saying, "It's none of your damn business."
I love that.
I know. It's like, good for you, girl. What is so powerful about her and the other women who testified is that this was huge for black women because just a few years before, like I said, they didn't have the rights to their own bodies. And even free black women were often raped, and there was zero justice for these women. And what's more is, with Thompson's example, we start to see black women reclaiming their bodies and trying to actualize citizenship.
Yeah.
I'm
about it.
The other thing is, really, she is the first trans woman that we really know about in American history.
Yeah.
We know it through it that it happened. Way before that, it's happened all through time. But this woman who already, let's face it, was persecuted, was treated poorly by society, was like, well, I'm going to go ahead and be me and be even more persecuted.
Yeah.
So the fact that she did this in that time, it's amazing.
Yeah, snaps for her.
It's like, and the man who wrote the book about it said a woman in 1866, which, literally is moments after the Civil War ended, fought bravely to live her truth against unthinkable kinds of peril and odds. And we need to honor that so future generations know and see themselves reflected in that experience.
Yeah.
Again, how brave,
honestly,
how amazingly brave was this woman to just, and what's funny is she was not, the things she was doing were not brave, but by her very act of living as herself, she was super brave.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Agreed. Yes. Snaps for her.
Yeah.
She did the damn thing.
And if you want to read about her name is Frances Thompson. You can Google her.
Thompson. I love that.
Gurgle her.
Gurgle.
Gurgle.
Okay, so the next person, I'm going to skip to one of my others because I really like this bitch a lot. Her name is Olga of Kiev. Okay? She is sainted after this. But what she did, maybe she shouldn't have been sainted for. But she was born in the late 800s, early 900s AD, right?
Okay.
She married a man named Igor of Kiev, and he was the ruler of Kiev, which is a part of, Russia.
Yeah.
At that point. But when he died, so she was the regent, right? She was the queen regent at that point. She just oversaw everything. But the neighboring city-state, which was the Drevlians, they had partnered with them to take over, or to conquer, the Byzantines and, fought the people. But now that her husband was dead, they killed her husband, first of all, and then wanted her land and power. So they said, oh, you should marry our prince, Mal, who was, the main murderer in her husband's story. So I'm just going to read a little bit, too, because she did a lot of things. So these men came and waited, the Drevlians came and waited outside of her court, being like, we're so sorry your husband's dead, but you should marry our big guy right here. And she said, nor, but she didn't say that to them. She said, okay, we'll come back next week. And so they brought their ships, and they all sailed into port. And so then the people of Kyiv picked up the ships and started to, like, carry them to, like, the palace, essentially. And they were all like, ooh, girl, we're getting, like, the treatment. We're being carried on a litter. Look at us. You know what I mean? We are slaying it. We are queens among queens. And so they thought it was a great honor. But the people brought them into court and dropped them into this giant trench that was dug the night before on Olga's command. And then she buried them alive and stood there, bent over, watching them all die as they're being buried alive. So then she sent a message to the Drevlins and were like, where are your men? I don't know where your men are. I haven't seen them. LOL, I don't know. And so they were unaware of that. And so they gathered and sent the best men who governed the land. When they got there, Olga commanded that a bath be drawn for them, and she would meet them after they had bathed. Well, she then had the bathhouse locked and the doors set on fire so no one could get out, and so just burned all of those men to a crisp. She was about revenge, girl. She said, you did what to my husband and you want my land? No. So then she was like, okay, well, how about this? I still haven't seen any of your envoys. Like, take me to where you killed my husband so I can grieve and hold, like, a funeral feast, and then I'll marry you. So they got there, and basically they just ran them out. They got them drunk and then started to butcher them, or took many of them as slaves. And this is, like, the Kievians versus the Drevlians. And then so she returned to Kyiv and was all, killed lots of them. So now the Drevlians are like, I think I know what's happening.
Wait a minute here. This is making sense now. I'm figuring some stuff out.
Yeah, exactly. And so she said, okay. Listen.
I might have killed
Okay. Listen, I didn't mean to. It was an accident. She said, okay, well, send me, 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each household in Drevlian land, right? Do that, and that's just, we'll peace. It'll be peace. I don't know what the birds represent, but girl, it'll be peace, okay? So then they said, oh, praise God, she's going to join our lands and we can marry her and take everything she has. Well, then she instructed her people to attach a piece of sulfur bound to a piece of parchment to each of the birds. And then what she had done was set the pieces of parchment on fire, and the birds, what do? Fly back to their nests. So all of these birds on fucking fire fly back to their nests and burn down the Drevlin.
Oh, God.
And no one could extinguish it.
I love her.
Yes, no one could extinguish it because everywhere was burning. And so the people who were fleeing were then slaughtered or taken as slaves.
Wow.
So this bitch was all, you did what to my husband? Okay.
Yeah. Now you all die.
And now you're all dead. Yep. You know what's brutal? That's why you said, are you talking about monsters? Kinda. But she was mad. So I think
and plus they were going to steal her land.
And, yep.
You know, and they'd already killed her husband, so...
Yeah, of course. So I love it, though. Just
do the means justify, or does the end justify the means? Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
Because really, I mean, it's no different than any other war started by a man, other than she was smarter, sneakier, and more efficient.
Yes, right?
So really, because what are wars always fought over? Land. Mm-hmm. You know, and they were trying to steal her land, and she said, oh, hell no. Oh, hell no.
I have known about Olga of Kyiv for a long time, and I
have heard this story before.
She's cool. I'm like, you're
but
an
smart.
idol. Yeah.
Smart. That is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I'm about it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love that. So the next woman I want to talk about.
Okay.
I mentioned her briefly last week when we were talking about Raquel Welch.
Okay.
Is Mae West.
Oh, I love Mae West, yeah.
So Mae West literally is someone I've been obsessed with since I was a little kid. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I don't know what it was about her other than she was just cool.
Yeah.
I mean, now when I was a kid, of course, she was already an old lady.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because she made her movies in the 30s and 40s. And then, so by the time I came along, you know, she was well into her life. Because she started making movies at 40. You know, so by 1800 when I was born. Anyway, so what's kind of cool about her is Mae West was just super smart and independent. And though all of her stuff was very sexual, she was never ever ruled by a man. You know, she got married, but no one ever even knew who the people was. Like, she got married and then, you know, got rid of him because she didn't need him.
I love that.
But in her younger days, she started. So when she was a kid, her mother took her to dance classes and singing lessons and all of that stuff. And she was never, she never did really particularly well in her classes because she's just like, I'm not interested. But as soon as she was an adult, she started writing plays for herself. Yeah. And she would do these plays in like small theaters and whatever. And she became so notorious for these because they were all very sexual.
Yeah.
And it was in a time before censorship really had kicked in. And so she would do these very bawdy shows and everybody loved them and they got to bigger and bigger audiences. And then she got to where she was doing them like on what's the equivalent now of on Broadway. So she's in huge houses that are completely sold out. And once she became that big of a success, that was when the censors kicked in and they were like, oh no, this woman is saying some stuff. She's saying some words. She's a monster. It's all very... And I can only imagine for the time, really, what was it that was so racy?
Right.
Well, she wrote a play called Sex and went to do it on Broadway and was arrested and taken to jail.
Of course.
For public indecency. But the warden of the jail was such a fan of hers that she didn't spend any hard time. She stayed with the warden and his wife.
I love that.
She was like, I mean, she had to stay in her cell some of the time. But she, like, the whole time got to wear her own lingerie.
I'm about
had
it.
her dinners with them, you know. So she did not serve any hard time.
No.
But she had become so well known that the movie studios came calling. Yeah. And so when she got her studio contract, she was 39 and just about to turn 40.
Wow.
And so
that's
unheard
crazy.
of.
Yeah.
Because at that point in time, anybody, if you were 40, you were the grandma.
Yeah.
You were, you know, the old matronly neighbor, whoever. You were not the ingenue. And she got to take the plays that she had written and transition them to movies.
Oh my God.
And of course the censors went crazy.
Right.
Because they're like, oh, you can't say that, you can't say that, you can't say that. So she intentionally wrote really, really dirty lines.
Yeah.
So that they would read those and be like, oh, cut, cut, cut. And then they would maybe miss some of the more kind of subtle
Yeah. I love it.
One of the first movie that she was in, she was a more minor character.
Okay.
And the star of the movie was so irritated because he said, and his quote was that she stole everything. What it was like, I can't remember what the accept was, but it was like basically she was the best part of the movie, and everybody else was overshadowed by this new woman who was just so sexual and so herself,
big and brassy,
and the funny thing is she was tiny. Yeah. Tiny, because you look at her in all of her movies and she doesn't look tiny.
No.
But she was 5 feet tall.
Oh my God, I didn't realize she was so
And
little.
she always wore very high platform shoes under her floor-length gowns. Excuse me. Because she didn't want to appear tiny. Yeah. She wanted to appear powerful.
Yeah. And she was curvy, huh?
Yeah. She was very curvy, but, you know, she wasn't considered a beauty. But it didn't matter because she was so alluring in just her ways and her manners, and she came across so sexual and confident that she was very, very popular. Okay. Shortly after she did this first movie, they then put her in a starring role of a movie that she wrote, and which women weren't writing movies. No. Women were barely starring in movies. Let's face it. And she became one of the highest paid actors in Hollywood for the time. She was the third highest paid person in the United States.
Holy shit.
Because she saved the studio from collapse. Because she, when she started there, and I don't know that I wrote down what studio she was at, doesn't matter. But the studio was in pretty dire straits. The movie business was not doing great. And when she came in, her movies were so popular that she literally turned it around and saved the movie studios.
That's crazy. How crazy? I wouldn't have known.
So after her movies started to wane, Because she did her thing for about 10 years. Where she was, but again, that was like 40 to 50. And she was playing the, lead woman.
Yeah.
She decided to take her act on the road. And was doing a one-woman show. Her one-woman show, though, I love this, was her singing, dancing, telling dirty stories, whatever. Because by then, the censors were not bothering with, like, nightclubs and stuff for the most part. But it was her and a bunch of mostly naked muscle men.
I love that.
So the muscle men are just posing on stage while she's singing and dancing and whatever.
I'm about that.
And they're just all greased up and, whatever.
Love it.
Her whole idea was she wanted everybody to have something to look at.
How fucking cute.
Well, Jane Mansfield was one of the people that came to her show and actually met her husband because he was one of the muscle men.
How funny.
Yeah, he was a Mr. Universe, I think, Mickey Harkaday.
Okay.
But he was one of her boys. Which I love.
Yeah.
And she did this stuff all the way up until her death.
Wow.
She was, it was like the last couple years she had to stop performing because she was no longer capable of standing.
Sure.
But the last movie she made, Sextet, where she still played like the lead, woman where all these men were after her, she was in her 70s.
Crazy.
And, it was campy and whatever. But at that point, she was struggling to still be able to do a lot of stuff. So they actually had her kind of on this back brace thing where she was kind of propped up to do her thing.
Can I have
but it was
one?
like, I know, it was like, can I just have that every day? Just put me and wheel me around,
and just
I will deliver
make
my
me
lines and do whatever. But
deliver my lines, just living your life.
Lift me up, roll me around, take me back. It's all good.
I'm into it.
But she, she did her thing. Right,
I love that.
And in the end, she was married to a very young man who,
good for her.
Who was married to her. I think the last 20 years of her life, something like that.
Damn.
But he was a very young man, and he said he always felt like his purpose in life was to take care of Mae West.
How fucking cute!
And he was with her until she died.
How precious! Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. Good for her. What a life!
But she changed the world. Literally from her thing that she did because before she was in the movies, again, women were done being, the lead. By the time women were not paid very well. Women were certainly not paid equal to men.
No.
And the fact that she showed the world you can be a sexual creature past 25,
Who knew?
And up into your old age.
Who knew, girl?
One of the other people who I was talking about the other day who was the same was Eartha Kitt. Because when I first saw her live, she was 74, and she was doing her and so just sexual energy coming. I was like 74 years old, and the energy that came off her was this definitely sensual kind of thing. And I'm like, why not?
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Why do you have to be young, whatever? Because
we said
let's face it, you're much smarter and know what you've been doing for longer.
Yeah, right? Yeah. I agree with you. Who just has the energy? You know what I mean? That's mostly me now. 34, I'm like, girl, I don't have the energy for that. I'm
Sex old. Or cake. I'd rather have cake.
I would rather sleep.
There's that too.
I want a nap.
And then cake.
I know, and then cake. Please and thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, who should I talk about next? Okay, I actually want to talk about this woman. Her name was... She was born in 1775. Okay. Her name was Qing Shi, and she was born in Canton, China. Okay. In her late teens, early 20s, she was sold into prostitution onto a floating brothel. And brothels at the time, especially if they're floating, were owned by pirates, right? Makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
So they were just giant fucking ships. I always think of like the ship from Hook. You know what I mean? Just a giant pirate ship that had little rooms in it where pirates could go get their kicks.
Go get their booty.
So there was a very successful pirate king, I guess. Main pirater. Captain? That's the word.
Captain.
He was the grand prize winner. Whatever they are.
He was the grand poobah.
He did it. Good for him. He saw her and fell in love with her. And I always say allegedly, because I don't know. But he was a very successful pirate from the South China Sea. And so he was, pillaging and taking and hoarding
As
money.
one does.
And so she said, oh, yeah, we can get married, but I have to be equal in power to you. And he said, yeah, okay. So she was like 26 years old, and she rose to like pirate queen of the South China Sea. He loved her a lot, allegedly. Because after his death, her options were to stay on the ship and somehow make means or go back into sex work, right? And sex work I use loosely because they were more like slaves. It wasn't like you got to
they weren't getting
them.
paid.
So, but she had so much influence over these pirates that she was able to elevate herself to captain. She just took over her husband's role. So she was...
Love that.
Yeah, so she was a woman. She was the pirate queen. So at the height of her group of pirates, she had over 400 ships and between 40 to 60,000 individual pirates.
Wow.
Are you fucking kidding me? That's
a lot.
Huge. So she just owns a floating city.
I can hardly manage my household.
Girl, I know.
Alone 60,000 people.
Right? So then in like the 1840s, she was like, yeah, I'm going to retire. Peace and harmony. I'm going to go with my adopted son and we're going to go run gambling houses. So then she did that for the rest of her life until she died in 1844. But I was like, you lived the majority of your life on the sea as a pirate queen. Like, that's all you have to say to me and I'd be all, okay, you're hired. For whatever it is, I don't care. You're hired. You are a pirate queen.
I want to say in one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, because, there's, 40 or 50 of them?
Roughly.
In one of them, she is actually referenced.
Ching Shi?
Yeah.
I love that.
I mean, I don't know if they use her actual name, but they have one of the characters who I believe is based on her.
Okay, cute.
Is in it because she is the lead of her fleet.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there were... I didn't realize, because again, when I was looking up women, I was just looking up lots of different things. I didn't want to look up just powerful leaders. I think that's kind of boring, right?
It is.
Political, blah, blah, blah. I don't give a shit. So I wanted people who've done interesting things. And I didn't realize that there have been quite a few, like, pirate queens around the world. Because I have another one on my list who became, like, the pirate queen of Ireland.
Nice.
Which is cool stuff. But we'll talk about her. But yeah, Ching Shi, I was like, how do you go from being sold into, like, slavery prostitution into becoming married to the all-father of captains,
pirates,
right? Yeah. And then you become the queen of pirates. Like, that's crazy to me. But good for you, girl.
Yeah.
Snaps. And she wasn't murdered.
I love that.
Yeah, good for her. Rape, no, don't do that. But pillage and take and hoard, everything but people, I'm into it.
Well, you got to do your thing.
Yeah, and as a woman, I mean, here's the thing. I don't know a lot about, like, East Asian politics at all, especially in antiquity. I could tell you, obviously, more about, like, how women were treated in the Mediterranean. But, like, I don't really know a lot about East Asian politics, especially in antiquity. So I can't imagine it was, like... it favored women by any means, So that's why they were doing things like, prostitution and being pirates.
Right.
I'm into it, okay? Super into it. Who's your next person?
I wanted to talk about, and I was like, what did I do with her stuff? There was this woman. Mm-hmm. Her name was Monemia McCoy.
Monemia McCoy?
Yes.
Name.
Monemia. Yeah, who knows what her real name was.
Right.
Because she was born into slavery. She gave birth to conjoined twins, Millie and Christine.
Millie and Vanilli.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, them. And because, of course, conjoined twins, very rare, especially if they live.
Yes.
Because they're not as rare to just be born, but they're rare to actually survive.
Right.
But their daughters Millie and Christine were joined at the pelvis.
Interesting.
So they looked like they were standing back to back.
Oh, wow.
I can only imagine what that birth was like.
Oh, I'm sure wonderful.
I'm surprised that didn't kill the mom. Because it's not like they did C-sections then.
No, man.
Mm-hmm. But because they were this rarity and this oddity, they were stolen from her.
Yeah.
And then sold.
Of course.
And she, as an enslaved woman, she had very little power to do anything.
Yeah.
But somehow managed, and they were sold to a European circus. She managed to travel all the way to Europe and steal her children back. Which I was like,
from where? Where are they?
From Europe. They were in. They'd gone to Great Britain.
Okay.
And managed to get them back. And there's a ton to the story.
Sure.
But the girls continued to work in like circuses and sideshows and stuff. But here in America, and they found them a reputable manager, and not only did they work, but they then, in their mother's older age, they bought the land where she had been enslaved. Wow. And built a home for her there.
My God.
I know, I love that. But it was like this badass woman, she's like, no, you're not taking my children.
Hell no.
Somehow managed to get on a ship and get over to Europe and steal her children back.
That's fucking
I love that.
Yeah, good for her.
Power of motherhood.
Girl, burn a city down.
Yeah. Why not?
Yeah, I'm into it. Okay, cute. Well, then if you're going to talk about the power of motherhood, this isn't a mother necessarily, but what her mother did after the fact was beautiful. So this is more, it's going to be mythology, because it has to do with ancient Greece and right before the Trojan War, okay? So there was a king named King Agamemnon.
Oh, yeah.
Who was like a Greek king. He was like the ruler of Greek land. And his wife, Queen Clytemnestra, they had a daughter. They had multiple children, but they had a daughter named Iphigenia. And this is right before the Trojan War, where the Greeks fought the Trojans, right?
Yeah.
And then so the Greeks have to sail to Troy, and that's where the battle happens. But what happened was they're at King Agamemnon's land, wherever the hell that is, in Greece, and decides they're waiting to sail off, and some of his men go hunting into a wood that they allegedly didn't know that was like a sacred wood to the goddess Artemis, who was like the goddess of like wildlife and archery, and she's also a Vestal Virgin. Go her. Anyway, so they kill a deer, and so Artemis said, "What the fuck do you do?" And so she like ripped the wind from the sky, so then it was just still air for days and days and days and days, and so they couldn't go to Troy and couldn't go to Troy. And so one of the seers, like, I can see the future, told Agamemnon that he needed to sacrifice somebody to Artemis to get the winds to blow again. And it has to be on, like, her sacred, I don't know what it is, like a pedestal table where they do sacrifices of things. And so he said, "No, I don't want to do that." So he didn't. He waited, and the winds didn't come, so they couldn't leave. So then he said, "You know what? Fine. I'll sacrifice my daughter." Obviously, no big deal.
Right, it's just a girl. Right,
and to get her and her mother, Clytemnestra, down to the beach where it was going to happen, they said, "Oh, you are going to marry Achilles." And if you know, which you do, Achilles was known as like the greatest of the Greeks. He was like the best fighter. He was a demigod. He is like one of the main characters in the Trojan War. Anyway, but Achilles was also, there's lots of stories about him being a heterosexual man. And I'm going to say just because he had children doesn't mean he was heterosexual.
No.
But, so she was all stoked that she gets to marry, like, the best warrior, and they get her down there, and they're all psych, and then tie her to, like...
The altar.
The altar, thank you. And, decide to slit her throat, and just wait for her to bleed out. And then guess what? The winds come back, and they say, "Thanks, Artemis," and take the fuck off. And no one grieves her, except her mother, who they leave behind. So Clytemnestra, and this is the story of Orestes too, who was Clytemnestra's other child. But this whole family, because King Daddy killed their daughter to go to fucking war for 100 years, Mommy decided when Daddy came back from war, she and her lover were going to kill him. So then they did. But then their son, King Agamemnon's son, is like, "You killed my dad," so then he killed his mother. And so it just became daddy killed daughter, mommy killed daddy, son killed mother. Like, everyone in the family.
Wow.
And so this family was known to be cursed in Greek mythology because, like, the fates, or not the fates, no, it was the fates who would, like, chase after them. Because things like patricide, or, matricide, killing your mother, killing your father, killing your husband, all those things were being broken, which are, like, some of the only, like, golden rules of, like, the Greek pantheon.
Sure.
Like, you don't kill your family, which is silly to me because the gods did all the time. But, so it just became the story of, like, a mother's revenge, which just turned into a complete assassination of her whole family. But, I mean, what else would you do? If your daughter was murdered, you would kill the man who did it. And if it just so happened to be your fucking husband, then your husband would die.
Although I would have killed him first before she has to kill her.
Agreed. I know. But, I mean, you know, she was a woman and there were a bunch of soldiers. What was she going to do? Because in a book, I think The Song of Achilles, she's, like, thrown... Maybe not some, but in a book, in a rendition of the story, she's, like, thrown in a pit with guards. So she can't, like, get out. But, yeah, that story is... and you know, it's touted as like, that's how we got to Troy, but I'm like, you sacrificed a young girl to get to Troy. Like, how upsetting is that? And some of the myth goes that, like, at the last second, Artemis changed her into a deer, so then Iphigenia was free and the deer got sacrificed. But in, like, the most common telling of it, Iphigenia was just sacrificed. Isn't that tragic?
That is tragic. No bueno.
No, it is really sad. But she is a story, I mean, she is like a symbol of, like, the women's fight, because in later traditions it is that she goes on to become like the high priestess of priestesses, essentially, who worship goddesses only, not gods. And so she's seen as like this powerful being. I just think her story is so sad, but I do think because she was sacrificed and she was murdered, that's why people should know who she is, you know? Like, fuck King Agamemnon, he was a piece of shit, but you should know who she was. She was the reason the Trojan War ever happened, that they ever got there, you know?
All right.
Stupid men. Stupid men. Mm-hmm.
Well, warring forever.
Yeah, and ever, and years.
And the Trojan War did go on for fucking ever.
For fucking ever. Like, over like, 10 years, or 10 years? Something
it was like 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Long time.
Yeah. All right, well, I'm going to bring us up into modern times.
Ew.
I know, but I want to talk about a woman who I think is super cool.
Okay.
I want to talk about T.S. Madison.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, I love her.
I love T.S. Madison. Mm-hmm. I became aware of her some time ago, but she had already achieved obviously some level of fame.
Yeah.
What's kind of funny to me is what brought her kind of to the public view was she had made a video that went viral, and it was just her talking about her weave, her like 22-inch weave and whatever. But as she's doing it, she's naked. She's sitting there naked, talking, you know, messing with her hair, talking about her hair. And because there's this very voluptuous black woman sitting there naked, talking about her, people were like, wait, what? Mm-hmm. This big girl is naked and is...
Naked?
That's not the story? Mm-hmm. You know, it's like, no. She's just talking about her hair.
Yeah.
You know, and her weave, and she's very famous for her, you know, always having different hair and weaves and, you know, whatever. But she made this thing, it went viral, and she became such a sensation that this record company actually signed her to a contract to make music. And from that, she went on to make, she has her own TV show called The T.S. Madison Experience. And it's the very first, she's the first black trans woman to star in, executive produce her own reality show. Which has now been renewed for a second season. It was a season, and it was quite a while ago, but, you know, pandemic happened. And so it was put on hold, and they are doing a second season. But she had been, prior to this, had been working in adult films, running her own production company, and she's written a book called A Light Through the Shade, an autobiography of a queen. Her voice is sampled on the song Cozy on Beyonce's album Renaissance.
Okay.
So
she's done some things.
She's done some things, and for a trans woman,
black woman as well.
A trans black woman.
Yeah.
She has achieved a lot of fame, but a lot of things that have put her in the public eye where people know who she is. Yeah. And what's funny is I didn't know, and you know this because we talked about this, I just assumed her initials were T.S. Madison, or, you know, or TS just stands for transsexual. And you knew that, but when I said this, you were like, yeah, duh. And I was like, well, I know that's what is, you know, often, but I just assumed since her name is T.S. Madison, I didn't think her, you know, was transsexual Madison. But Madison is actually her first name.
Oh, yeah, okay.
See,
well, it's probably, T.S. Madison is probably a carryover from her adult film days.
Yes, I imagine so, but obviously, You know, it's something also part of her
like persona
identity that she's very, very proud of.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, she's very proud and very outspoken about being a trans woman. And I love that.
I love her.
And now she is a pretty frequent guest judge on RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yeah.
And this week in particular, I found her to be very inspiring because in the Untucked, which is where they go behind the scenes and talk to the girls, not when they're not on stage, she came in the dressing room, was talking to the girls, and was asking one of the girls why she was so down on herself and why it was like, no, you have made it this far. You are a big black girl on stage on RuPaul's Drag Race. You're phenomenal.
Yeah.
Why are you doubting yourself?
Yep.
Don't do that.
Get it
don't
together,
don't
bitch.
do that energy.
Yeah, right.
You know, be proud of who you are, proud of how far you've gotten. Because just to be one of the people selected to be on there is a huge feat.
Right.
You know, and to have made it more than halfway through the competition.
And it has to have gotten more and more competitive since season.
Oh, God, yeah.
Even the big earlier seasons.
But, I mean, this one in particular, she was saying this was her 6th time auditioning for the show, and she finally made it on. You know, it was like, yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And the fact that you even did this, people are going to know your name.
Yes, ma'am.
But the fact that she was in there, like, giving these girls pep talks.
Yeah.
And, there's one of the contestants this year is trans woman Sasha Colby, who is very, very well known in the drag community. But she also was saying to her how proud she was that she was there representing the trans community, and I love that. I thought it was pretty great.
I love that.
Yeah, so I love her.
Agreed.
And of course, she's the one who we reference often because she made a video where she was talking about her weave, and she's like, "Is this Puerto Rican hair?
Puerto Rican?
Puerto Rican?
Or Mexican?" Yeah, remember because then she was talking about Selena.
Because
she had like, I looked like
bitty,
Selena.
bitty, bitty butt. And they're like, no, that's Selena. She's not Puerto Rican. She's Mexican.
And she's like, but the girl who played her, Puerto Rican.
Yes, J-Lo is Puerto Rican.
Yes, I love it. I know, she's funny.
She is funny.
Okay,
we have time for you to talk about one more person.
Perfect. Because this person I want to talk about is maybe actually a monster. Back in Italy, in the 1500s, there was a woman born named Giulia Tofana. She made perfumes and little potions and little doodads, you know, for women and for men and for their needs. But she made a specific perfume called Aqua Tofana. Aqua Tofana was actually poisonous and had way more arsenic in it than it needed. And it started because allegedly her mother had started this business and making these like concoctions. But when she came up with Aqua Tofana, there were abused women who were coming to her being like, I need out of my marriage because they weren't able to leave their husbands.
Yeah.
So Giulia Tofana said, here, give them this. Use this. Tell them it's, you know, their new perfume. Or you can just poison them with it. So these women... And there was a ring of women who were like, what? You're my savior. And went and just poisoned their husbands. And then it grew. And then more men were poisoned. And so then she was eventually...
Well, so far I'm not seeing how she's a monster.
Right. Agreed. I don't think but I mean, she is not looked at in history as a good person. So then there was a huge uproar because men are dropping dead and their wives are all, yay,
I'm sad. I'm sad?
Trying not to.
I'm sad, right?
Yeah, right?
That's how I should feel, sad?
Right, so there's a huge
My
hullabaloo.
abusive husband is dead, and I'm so heartbroken.
But, so then uproar, she left. She sprinted out of there, and she took sanctuary in a convent, where she continued to make poison.
Well, if you got a good gig going on...
Girl, why stop? But the church offered her sanctuary. They built a wall around their church so no one could get in to get her. She was, like, safe there until it was discovered that she was still making poison and giving poisons out to poison more men. So then, you know, the townspeople, the army, whoever, came in and murdered her and then threw her over the wall of the church. So now she was on, like, public land and no longer church land. But again, I'm like, I think in my little idea, she's a little hero. You know what I mean? You're like saving women from domestic violence.
Yeah. If she was just randomly killing all these folks just for no reason, not so good. But, you know, the fact that she was helping these women get out of abusive situations, which at that time, think about it, there was no way for these women to get out of these. They were probably sold to that marriage to start with.
Yes.
You know?
Well, and that's the thing, too, is 1500s Italy. I don't know what the witch trials were like in Italy specifically, because, you know, all over Europe, witch trials were happening during that time, and, like, hundreds of thousands of women and men were murdered.
And she definitely would qualify as a witch.
Yeah.
I mean, she was brewing up stuff, and that's all it took.
That's it.
Although, to face it, by the time it reached America, it didn't even take that.
No, you could...
It was like, I saw her communing with the devil or talking to a bird or whatever. It's like...
My favorite thing is, like, you could live alone. You could stay up too late. You could be too ugly. You could be too pretty. You could have a black cat. You could... Any of these fucking things. And it's just, like, a list. If you were alive...
Sorry, I couldn't sleep.
I know,
witch.
right? I know. She was a witch. And someone could just point at you. And
accuse her of witchcraft. Witch.
Burn her to the stake. Yeah, so, but I love the story of Aqua Tofana. I love that she's all... I see a business opportunity here.
Right. I can't fault her for that. No,
agreed.
not a monster. I have deemed her not a monster.
Oh my god. The history books are changing.
Right. I have got out my gavel and I'm pounding it. Not a monster.
It's your sound machine.
Listen, that's all I got, man.
Jesus.
So,
Jesus.
you know.
Yeah, I got you. Thank you.
Not a monster. All the people applaud her who saved them from abusive marriages. But I do wonder what then happened to those women, because at that time, I wonder if at that point women were yet allowed to even own property.
Right.
Or maybe they all got together and were like, let's all go live together in a place where we just don't need men.
And that's how the you know, mythological land of the Amazons happened. The women were so, fuck you, I'm out. And they went out of their own. Yeah, right, exactly.
Keep a few men around for breeding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, last night I was asking Astra, who should I add to the list? And she said, oh, you should add Diana Prince. And I was like, who's Diana Prince? Bitch, it's Wonder Woman.
Princess Wonder Woman.
Yeah,
girl.
right? I know. Well, I was like, I didn't think about it. And I was like, you stupid bitch.
Well, Wonder Woman's pretty amazing.
Well, she's Wonder Woman.
Yeah,
so
you're
she's
a Wonder Woman.
Wonderful. Anyway.
And now that we've gone off the deep end...
Yeah, cool. This was fun.
It was
a great
fun.
time.
It was fun. So I'm sure next week we'll be talking about some more women and some more things and some more whatever. I know. Maybe we'll try to talk about more conventional women. Nah.
Fuck that.
Why would we do that?
Like who? Like Lady Bird Johnson?
Speaking of Lady Bird, have you ever seen that movie? I love that movie. Mm-hmm. It was so good.
It was so good.
But I love Saoirse Ronan.
Oh, same. I adore her. What is her name? Who's the mother?
Isn't it Laurie Metcalf?
I thought it was Allison Janney.
That's what I said.
Okay.
You heard something entirely different. I don't know why you did that.
Hello, police?
She's
telling me I'm wrong.
Yeah. Was it Allison Janney?
I thought so. Am I crazy?
Look it up right now.
Oh my god. Sorry, this is how we
work. She's going to look it up right now. I realize we're overtime, so while she's looking it up, I will do all the end of the show kind of stuff, and then we'll get back to that. So if you liked our show, like, share, subscribe, get a podcasting app, do all that stuff. Send us messages at itwouldseemasthough@gmail.com. What'd you find out?
Yeah, you're right.
It was Laurie Metcalf?
I thought it was Allison Janney this whole time. I don't know anybody.
Allison Janney did play the mom in I, Tonya.
Oh, you know.
She was a fucking beast.
She was horrible.
She's so good. Did she win the Oscar for that? I think she did.
I don't know. Like, don't ask me any more questions. I clearly don't know anything.
I'm making stuff up. Who cares?
That's what we do here.
Yeah. That's what we do.
Yeah. So next week, more women.
Crime. That's what we do.
Duh. More women talk next week.
More women talking about women.
Great. Love that for us.
Are you done?
Oh, I'm done.
Okay, it would seem as though.
Whoops. Whoopsies.
Oh,
what did you do?
I didn't do anything.
We're going to try that again.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
It would seem as though.